Productions.
Welcome to Something Rhymes with Purple, live from London's Cadogan Hall.
Wow, thank you so much for joining us. This episode goes out for the first time on Tuesday, the 29th of March. That's 3 days before the famous April Fool's Day, Gyles. So we thought we'd spend this episode exploring the colourful language of fools and jokers and hoaxers.
Well, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Until the chair that Susie is sitting in explodes, which is a little joke that I've set up. Or not, as the case may be.
How are you with April Fool's Day? Because obviously it's a day for pranksters. Have you always been one of those, or do you just ignore it?
I love April Fool's Day. I love the idea. I mean, there is a famous Chinese saying, there's no pleasure so great as seeing a good friend fall off the roof.
I was going to say harmless pranks, but clearly that does not fall into that category.
So I like a practical joke, and we'll be sharing some with you as we talk on. I mean, are you going to be able to begin by telling me the origin? Why is it called April?
Yeah.
Fool? And where does the word fool come from, for a start?
OK, well, fool simply goes back to the Latin follis, F-O-L-L-I-S, which actually meant a windbag. So somebody who... somebody who loved to bloviate, you know, just blow...
I'm so sorry. I'm taking pills for it now.
Yes, a blower of hot air.
A bloviator.
A bloviator. So, yes, that's the idea. So it was a fool who just basically spoke rubbish. I'm not looking at you for that. So that's where fool comes from. As for April Fool's Day, we're not quite sure. We know in ancient Roman times there was a festival called the Hilaria, and hilaris then already meant something that induced laughter. And on such days, nobody was allowed to be glum. I mean, I'm not sure how they policed this, but everybody had to be smiley, cheerful, not say a bad word about anybody else. I mean, that would be quite a positive day on social media if we said that.
It's a lovely idea.
It is, isn't it?
And I think it would work in the country. I've found that if you go around in London smiling at people, you get arrested.
Yeah.
People find it a bit disconcerting. But
well, that is probably true.
Hillary, as in the
Yes.
name Hillary.
Yes.
As in hilarious. This is all one root.
Yes.
Remind me of what that root is again. Say it again.
It's the Latin hilaris, essentially, which was simply joy or mirth or laughter. So on this Hilaria festival, which I think were offered up to the gods of fertility, for example, because this is springtime, they would have masquerades, they would have, you know, all sorts of games. That may be that from those days in March, April the 1st, took over that role of some, you know, somewhere where we play jests and jokes, etc.
As I recall, the rules of April Fool are that you set up the prank, and then when the prank has been performed, you say April Fool to the victim, and you can only do it up until 12 noon on April Fool's Day.
And after that, you become the fool, right?
I think so. The roles are reversed. My father was he loved an April Fool. Some of them weren't really. He did them all year round. He used to have a glass called the dribble glass. It was a wine glass that matched all the other wine glasses that had little cuts in it. It was crystal. And when my sister's boyfriends came round, he would test them by giving them this dribble glass and pouring in the wine, and then the poor fellow would drink it. Yes, and dribble down the front. And my father would just laugh at them. None of my sisters, of course, got married. That's not true. They were all very happy with their eventual partners.
They all passed the test.
But his father had a little device, like a pad and a tube, and the pad would blow up. And he would put this pad under a plate at the dinner table, under the tablecloth. And so when someone came to dinner, he could rock their plate by pressing a bulb at one end, and it would make the plate go up. And so people were having soup, the soup would spill. Yes.
Well, this is beginning to form a picture here, I think, the way you came from.
Okay, that's my family.
Let me just say that before we had April Fools in Scotland, they had Hunty Gauk Day. And a gauk in Scots is a cuckoo or a foolish person. So there was a game called Hunt the Gauk, okay, and it was a traditional prank. So somebody, the victim, is asked to deliver a letter. And unbeknownst to them, the letter, which, when they deliver it, this is what the recipient reads: "Dinny laugh, dinny smile, hunt the gowk another mile." And the victim does not know this. So the victim is then instructed to go to another person with the same letter, and so it goes on and on. It sounds very complicated, but apparently it was fun. So that's Hunt a Gowk Day. And in France, do you know what it's called in France, April Fool's Day?
I do know,
Okay.
because I spent a lot of time, and I went to the Lycée Français de Londres, not far from here in South Ken, where incidentally I met General de Gaulle, who was the
Why does that not surprise me?
president of France at the time. And I don't think he knew he was meeting me, but I was there, lined up. And he arrived, he had an enormous bidon.
A bidon?
A
Or a
bidon,
bidet?
it means a stomach, and a huge nose. And interestingly enough, I remember him being in uniform, but I've seen the photographs of the day, and he wasn't in uniform. And he came to the school, and where we would call April Fool's Day Poisson d'Avril.
Yeah.
Why is it called April Fish? What is the origin of that?
I'm not sure we entirely know. I just know that there are quite a few pranks on Poisson d'Avril where a sort of fish is tied to someone's back, unbeknownst to them. And then if the newspapers run these ridiculous stories, as our press often does, on April Fool's Day, there's usually some kind of fish clue in there to let you know that it's all made up. Why a fish? I don't know. I should know, but I don't. And I'm not sure anyone does. So
I like the idea of the jester as a character too. I mean, Shakespeare's plays are full of jesters,
Yeah.
lumbered now with jokes that after 400 years are not as funny as we hoped they were originally. But characters like Feste, Touchstone, you know, and in that costume, the traditional jester's costume.
Yeah.
Where does the word jest come from, and jester?
Jest is quite interesting because it was originally a jest was something really notable. So it was a kind of exploit. It wasn't a joke at all. So it goes back to the Latin gester, meaning actions, which gave us gesture, of course, U-R-E. And originally it was like a narrative of someone's great deeds. But because it was often quite boastful, quite a lot of name dropping in there, Gyles, it came to mean some kind of idle story that someone trotted out all the time. And from there, it came to mean a joke, but usually at someone else's expense. That's where that comes from. A hoax is quite nice. I'll tell you the origin of hoax, because it's mixed up with hanky-panky, believe it or not. So hanky-panky for us means something very specific, doesn't it, really? It's a bit like rumpy-pumpy or, that kind of thing. Don't you think?
Totally. I know exactly what hanky-panky means, as do quite a few of the people here, from what we know. Hanky-panky, what's the origin of hanky-panky?
So it's kind of sexual indiscretions, really, isn't it? But
why is it called hanky-panky?
well, we think it's probably an alteration of hocus pocus, believe it or not. So hocus pocus, obviously said by conjurers as they do their tricks, like abracadabra, etc. But that, in turn, is probably based on a pseudo-Latin phrase, which is hax pax deus addimax.
Say it again.
Hax pax deus addimax. And that was used as a kind of pretend, as I say, pseudo magic formula, if you like. And it was that probably gave us hocus pocus, hanky-panky, and hoax.
Very good. Why did hanky-panky come to mean a bit of hanky-panky?
It was probably...
Given hocus pocus clearly is a bit of nonsense or a bit of magic.
Well, it was trickery and then dishonest behaviour, I guess, was the idea, and then sexual indiscretions. I bet it was something like all those euphemisms in Private Eye. Wasn't it sort of having Ugandan relations or something? Do you remember that?
I do remember.
Yes.
I don't remember having Ugandan relations, but I do remember the phrase.
Yes.
As a euphemism. But I think hanky-panky goes back before then, doesn't it?
Hanky-panky itself is the 1830s, so not that far back.
1830s, okay.
Yeah.
So a hoax is from hocus pocus.
That's what we think.
Very good.
Hocus
So if you're a hoaxer, a prankster, what's a prankster?
Prankster, we don't know where prank comes from, but originally it meant a wicked deed, so it was much, much stronger than it is now.
So a prank was something really serious.
Yes. It's undergone what linguists very romantically call semantic bleaching. In other words, it's become a bit diluted over time, but it was really quite strong.
How come you can get to the root of some words but not others?
Because we're detectives and we don't always find the right clues and they get lost in time. And actually, you'd think that the older a word is, the more difficult it becomes. But actually, I find the older a word is, the easier it is because the printed records are fewer and you kind of have a narrower base with which to work. Whereas if you're looking for a modern slang term and you're looking for the etymology of it, where do you start? Because it could have been on a tweet, it could have literally come from anywhere, because a word these days can be across the world in, 2 seconds. So it's really hard to get to the bottom, particularly of slang, because that's the fastest moving language in the world, and it's very slippery when it comes to its etymology.
But prank, it sounds such a solid word.
Yeah.
What is the oldest prank that we... I mean, how many hundreds of years have there been pranks going on?
So 1529 is the first record we have. A malicious trick, a wicked deed, a deceptional scheme intended to harm. And then by not long after, actually, late 16th century, a magical trick or feat. 1576, a practical joke, a lark. And by 1692, it was an erratic or seemingly capricious action of an inanimate object. Oh, you know when... It reminds me of something. You know when you are buttering a piece of toast and it falls on the floor and the butter is always the bit on the floor, you know, it's always butter side down. Or when a table bumps into you, for example, if you're walking around, you know, that sort of... The revenge of inanimate objects is called resistentialism.
Resistentialism?
Yeah. So if you're really, really angry, and I tweeted yesterday about, we've mentioned this in our episode on swearing, but lalokizia, which is the release of stress and frustration and pain and anxiety through swearing, that for me is completely linked with resistentialism, because when something does bump into you like that, you might have a bit of lalokizia going on.
If we were time travellers and could go back 500 years to 1600, do you think we would understand the English being spoken by people in London?
That's a really good point. Yes, but at that stage, and a little bit later on as well, you had lots of pronunciation shifts where sound and spelling completely divorced. So...
Oh, explain. Give us an example.
Okay. So, for example, during the Renaissance, you would find the letter B creeping into words like debt or doubt, or the letter P coming into receipt, or the L into salmon. So silent letters suddenly appeared, and this is because Renaissance scribes wanted to show off their Latin, essentially, and they wanted to restore what they felt was the classicism, the classical beauty to English.
Oh, so receipt would have been written R-E-C-E-T, as it were.
Something like that.
Like
So doubt was D-O-U-T.
They put a P in to make it, to show that they knew where it came from.
Receptor, and doubt comes from dubitum, which is why we have indubitably. So they took the Old English doubt, D-O-W-T, and D-O-U-T, and thought, well, we're just going to put a B in there, but we won't pronounce it. So that's what we did, and we did that with salmon, and we did that with plumber, which didn't have a B until they came along and said, oh, but the Latin for a lead pipe is plumbum, so we're going to put that in there as well. Because the Romans were dealing in lead pipes for, you know, for sanitation, etc. So they sometimes got it wrong, so they put an S in island, thinking it came from the Latin insula, when in fact it didn't. It was from the Vikings, Igland. So really we should be talking about Britain being a lovely Igland, not an island.
But we must reform the language. We must... No, today is the day we launch the campaign. That S has been there under false circumstances in Ireland.
I know, but this is what makes English so beautiful. You know, I always tell you about that H in ghost, which is a complete hiccup. And I always tell the story.
Remind me about the H in ghost.
Sorry if you've heard this from me so many times. It's one of my favourites. So the H in ghost goes back to a Flemish typesetter who was employed by William Caxton, who of course brought the printing press to England and did so much to standardise English spelling, which was so chaotic before then that Shakespeare spelled his own name differently twice on the same document, which was his will. So that's how chaotic it was. And Caxton came along, he'd learned his trade in Flanders, couldn't find enough typesetters over here, so he brought over some of his colleagues who spoke Flemish, and they saw G-O-S-T in one book, and they thought, that looks all wrong, because their native Flemish at the time was Geest, G-H-E-E-S-T. And so they lobbed an H into our ghost. Thought that looks better. This would just be one person, one single typesetter. And then not only that, but it had a ricochet effect. So ghastly, which didn't have an H, got one, and a ghast as well. All from one person. That's why I love all this.
It's amazing, isn't it? You mentioned Shakespeare there. I find, and I know Shakespeare reasonably well. I love Shakespeare.
You met him, actually.
In my dreams, certainly. But I wonder if I did meet him, whether I'd be able to understand a word he said. When I go to the plays, even now, it takes me the first 20 minutes of being in the theatre, listening to get my ear attuned to it.
But that's what it is, it's immersion. You'd be okay. Same with Chaucer, actually.
So immersed in it at the time. You think I'd even understand... I mean, at school, I had a wonderful teacher called Mr. Gardner, who read to us from Chaucer. And Chaucer was really difficult on the page. But when he read it, it was so amusing, it was so alive, and we understood from the way he was reading it what it was about. So that's what he was saying to me, that, as it were, the telling of the story.
Yeah. It is all about immersion and, as you say, getting your ear for it.
OK, let's go back to... So you've given us several words. You've given us hoaxer and prankster. If by any chance you do know what prankster is, lexicographers for hundreds of years haven't found the origin. If you are tuning in and you think you do know, please get in touch with us. It's purple@somethingelse.com. The Fool. Tell us a bit about the Fool as a character.
Well, the Fool is a character. I mean, yes, you've got so much history there. You've got the Fool in Shakespeare, who was always the soothsayer, really, if you think about King Lear, who was the only one who dared to tell the truth. But there have been so many... I mean, it's so interesting. I always say that the dictionary does insults really, really well and compliments really badly, because, of course, that's reflecting us, sadly, that we're not very good at compliments, but we're really good at insulting other people. And there is so... If you look at... one of the things the OED has is a historical thesaurus. So if I look up fool in the OED, I just click on thesaurus and I will literally get a timeline, a chronology of synonyms for a fool from the word go. And so I picked some out for you, OK?
Good.
This is one of my favourite because it may or may not describe some people heading up the country. I have to be careful because Gyles was a Tory MP. No longer, but you were one.
I was.
Politically, we're quite different.
I was a member of Parliament until the people spoke. The bastards.
So this is one that I just think, I mean, it can actually sum up anybody you would choose to... I'm just treading very carefully here. OK, I'm just going to go for it. Unasinous. Unasinous is a riff on unanimous, and unasinous means united in stupidity.
Oh. And has that been invented? Useful. Well, obviously, all words in a sense.
Invented, but quite a long time ago. So, yeah, about 2 centuries ago. So, as I say, it was...
Unasinous. U-N-A-S-I-N-O-U-S.
Yeah.
And it's deliberately formed.
One ass.
Oh, I see. Unasinous. So united in stupidity.
Yeah, so unanimous means one mind, one spirit, and unasinous means one ass. Yeah. Not one arse, one ass.
Well, actually, what I've found, both when I was an MP and subsequently, is if you ever ask people about their own individual member of Parliament, they say, oh, well, he or she, it's not too bad, I met them, they're OK. It's only people when they're talking in the generality of politicians.
So true. That's very true.
They hurl abuse casually.
It's the collective nouns, isn't it?
My experience was actually people in all parties, actually, that are good people. And I was particularly touched when I stood for the first time that the monster raving loony party withdrew their candidate and said, if you wanted to vote for them, vote for Gyles. Rather nice, which may explain the small majority that I had. So, unasinous.
Unasinous, yes. And you're absolutely right. But then the dictionary also has so many political epithets for individual politicians too. So, it's strange, isn't it? We've obviously always slightly mistrusted those in charge. Anyway, a saddle-goose is another
Saddle-goose, I like that one.
Yeah, saddle-goose. That's from the 14th century. And it's just listed in the thesaurus for fool. But I can only imagine it's because have you ever tried to saddle a goose? And if you have, you're a fool.
Oh, I see. Trying to put a saddle on a goose and ride around on a goose.
Yes.
That's funny. The saddle-goose.
And then there's little, and I don't know how to pronounce this, little, it's either Whitham, but it's not spelled with a Y, or Witham. So it's W-I-T-H-A-M, might be Witham, actually. But in the 1500s, a little Witham was a synonym for a fool, because apparently it was a village where the inhabitants were well known for their stupidity. What would our modern equivalent be, do you reckon?
Normal for Norfolk.
Oh.
No, but people do say that sort of thing, don't they?
They do, yeah.
I mean, exactly.
Very cruel.
It is. It's cruel. It's hostile. It's like you talking about politicians. It's a kind of stupid generalisation.
I do apologise, but sometimes it's...
But so Little Witham is a real place?
Yes, it was a real... Oh, there probably is still... Shall I look it up? It says Essex, but there's no Little Witham that I can find now, so maybe it was... I don't know.
OK. So a Little Witham is a fool. Give me some more.
A Little Witham was a fool, and then you've also got...
Poltroon?
Oh, poltroon. Yes, now that's interesting, actually, because you know the word poltergeist? Well, obviously you know the word. So to polter, or polten in German, is to go around making a very, very big noise. So I think there will be, if you look far back enough, a poltroon will be linked to that idea of sort of crashing around and being sort of quite slapstick heavy. So this is interesting. So I'm looking up in the OED about the poltroon. So it may, there's lots of different theories, and another one is that it goes back to the French poltron, meaning a coward, because popular belief or popular etymology had it that it goes back to a Latin phrase being maimed in the thumb, which people would do to themselves in order to shirk military service. Isn't that weird? Ooh. So if you were foolish enough to do that, I suppose. But anyway, that is probably a folk etymology. And then another one is that it goes back to the idea of being a young chicken, but there's that sense of cowardice behind.
But this is intriguing. This often occurs, what you call a false etymology, a kind of false history that's come along, that people think that must be the origin.
Yeah.
So nobody quite knows with poltroon, but it could possibly be to do with a chicken?
Possibly to do with a chicken, possibly to do with a truncated thumb, and possibly a link to the polton,
as in a poltergeist.
Poltergeist,
but none of which do we firmly know.
No. Oh, no, and that is the case for so many words, actually, where there are lots of competing theories, and we're still weighing up the evidence, It's fascinating. It's a great gig.
Give me some more.
Well, you've got the dizzard from the 1600s.
Who?
The dizzard.
The dizzard?
Yes, that's simply somebody who's a bit dizzy and giddy. Giddy? Do you remember giddy? I think I remember telling you where giddy comes from.
Well, the challenge is remembering these things. Where does giddy... No, but it is.
No,
and that's why I often say to Susie, please repeat the word. And I try to use the words in conversation later in the day and actually write them down, because otherwise, they just in one ear, out the other.
So giddy was someone who was thought to be possessed by a god. So they were kind of gaudy, if you like. So they were thought to be so fanatical that they were possessed by some demon.
And does giddy relate to dizzy as well?
No, so dizzy, I think, was again born for its sound, and you'll find similar ones, or what we call cognates, in lots and lots of different languages. The diz and the dits and the idea of the kind of... If you imagine a cartoon character, you would just get those little kind of curly lines coming out of your head.
What about...
And there's the plonker.
Plonker?
Yes.
I love, she points directly at me and says, there's the plonker. What is the origin of plonker?
So nothing to do with plonk, as in cheap wine. That's basically a bastardisation of vin blanc. Vin blanc, plonk. So it was cheap white wine. Plonker was a penis. So we have a great tradition of comparing, particularly when it comes to men being slightly foolish or annoying or contemptible, indeed.
As in what a dick.
What a dick, what a prick.
What a plonker. I'm getting it.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's the...
What about nincompoop? Because my wife often says to me, what a nincompoop.
Yeah. Again, jury's out. We're not completely sure. You always think it's from non compos mentis, don't you? Yeah. No proof for that at all, that it would totally make sense. But we think it's some kind of riff on poop, meaning sort of something worthless. It's got a very pleasing sound, nincompoop, but that's where we think that one comes from. And then Wally. Do you remember the story of the Wally?
Wally.
Well, this is one where I really hope it is true, and it does seem likely that it was at least popularised during a 1960s pop concert when somebody called Wally had clearly gone missing. So over the tannoy, they were sort of saying, well, Wally, please report to such and such. And this went on so often that it was then picked up by all the people at the concert. And some people have it as a football game, but I think it was a concert. And people were picking it up, and the crowd was chanting, where's Wally, where's Wally, where's Wally? So... yeah.
That's extraordinary.
I know, it's great, isn't it? I love it.
You want to give us the three more that are there? Do you want to have the break first?
Yeah, let's come back, actually.
OK, because I've got rather a treat for you during the break. Delicious, because I think you like this.
I can touch your garb.
You touch my... But I've got a lovely coffee and walnut cake with some lovely butter icing for you and for your daughter, who is here, and her friend.
Yes.
April Fool. Haven't got anything at all. Yeah, I agree. That was a bit cheap. That was a bit cheap. We're talking about words for fools.
Yeah.
And your list included a word that I'd come across, but a niddycock. What is a niddycock?
A niddycock is, well, we were talking about plonkers before the break, so again, you have the same anatomical reference, really. But it was a riff in the 16th century on an idiot. An idiot, which I love because it sounds really modern, but an idiot was somebody who was idiotic with knobs on. You see, I've done it again. With bells on. So an idiot was a complete and utter idiot, and niddycock was the niddy bit, and then the sort of, you know, the penis reference again. And you had a noddy pole as well, which is another part of the body. Do you remember the pole?
The poll, as in poltroon?
No, as in deed poll, as in poll tax. Do you remember what that?
No. Tell me.
So the poll is an old dialect word for the head. So a poll tax was like a sort of...
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah, almost like a tax per head count, if you like. And a tadpole is a toad head because it looks almost as though it's just a toad and nothing else, a head of a toad and nothing else. So that's linked to...
And
so
noddy?
Noddy pole...
Noddy comes from nodding.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
I love Noddy was, for me, my role model, really.
Noddy and Big Ears.
Noddy and Big, they were a lovely double act, weren't they?
Yeah, they really were.
Well done, Enid Blyton, creating that innocent world. Oh, I love The Faraway Tree. Was that one of your favourites?
I loved all Enid Blyton, but like so many of my generation, she was banned from school. But I had a black market at the, you know, I said I was a librarian. I had a few under the table transactions of Enid Blyton. Just for a little while.
I tell you what I'm doing at the moment, and I do recommend this because the world is very grim, and I think it's not a good thing to watch the television news late at night. I'm going to bed and I'm rereading my childhood favourites. And I was born on the 8th of March, I recently had a birthday, and the same day as Kenneth Grahame, the person who wrote Wind in the Willows.
Yeah.
And if you want comfort reading that's beautifully written and evokes a wonderful world, the world of mole, ratty, badger, toad, marvellous, go back to Wind in the Willows. So if you had a childhood favourite, whatever it might be, go back to it now. And if you haven't yet read The Faraway Tree, what a treat you're in for.
Yeah, that's very true. So should we finish off Fools? I found a fantastic quote from 1668, which is, in fact, I think, one of the first references to nincompoop, which we discussed before the break. And it talks about the ship of fools. So it says, the ship of fools fully fraught and richly laden with asses, jackdaws, ninny hammers, coxcombs, slender wits, shallow brains, paper skulls, simpletons, nickompoops, wiseacres, dunces, and blockheads.
When's that?
That's great, 1668.
1668, and almost the majority of those words are still in current use.
I know.
It's fantastic.
I like paper skull.
Repeat the lines to us again.
Okay. The ship of fools is fully fraught and richly laden with asses, fools, jackdaws, ninny hammers, coxcombs, slender wits, shallow brains, paper skulls, simpletons, nickompoops, wiseacres, dunces, and blockheads.
Here is our audience. No, I'm joking. But isn't it the ship of fools? What a wonderful concept.
I know.
Who wrote that? I mean, do we know where that comes from?
It's just, it is a story from 1668, yeah, describing the ship of fools, which was quite a popular trope. But talking about our fantastic audience, I think we need to give enough time for their questions.
Good.
We'll start off with one question that was sent in to us, purple@somethingelse.com, because it's kind of linked to the idea of fools, and it's from Angie McCormick. And would you want to read it out?
It says, "Hi, Susie and Gyles. A friend and I recently came across the excellent German word...
Backpfeifengesicht.
You say the German word, do you?
Backpfeifengesicht.
Backpfeifen.
Pfeifen.
Backpfeifengesicht.
Yeah.
Meaning someone who looks like they need a slap in the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any idea where this great word comes from? Oh, Angie. Wonderful.
Yes, so a Backpfeife is simply a slap, and a Gesicht means a face. So yes, that's exactly it. I have accused Jimmy Carr of having one of these. A face in dire need of a slap. A Backpfeifengesicht. It's brilliant. So thank you for that, Angie. But I know we will have many, many more questions. And we do have a roving mic, don't we?
We have a roving mic, and we have Here, questions from the audience have already
okay.
arrived, as it were.
Okay.
William Wallace, do you want to ask your question out loud, or shall I read it for you? Oh, you can speak. Good. William, well, William is over here.
Thank you. Mint. The herb mint and the royal mint, is there a connection between the two?
Oh, that's a good question.
Mint.
Mint. No, there isn't. I'd love to say there was. So the royal mint, which was minting money, obviously, that goes back to actually the Roman goddess of money and lots of different things, Moneta. And it was in her abode that the first coins were said to be printed. So that's where we get the mint, and that gave us money as well. Moneta gave us money. And the mint, the beautiful herb, that is linked to German because, as I always say, English is a Germanic language at heart. So in German we have a Pfefferminz, quite hard to say, and that's where we get mint from, is their mints. Yeah, so they came in two very different strands.
What is amazing is she genuinely knows this stuff. You know, it is extraordinary. Jeremy from New Malden is here. Where are you, Jeremy? What's your question?
So this goes back to the discussion about fools, and you mentioned hilarious and hilarity. And I seem to recall that at university, the Easter term was called the Hillary term, but it never struck me as being particularly hilarious.
Hilarious. No. No, although I think there was a phrase to keep Hillary, or to keep Hillary term, that meant to kind of keep cheerful, sort of slang term. But that Hillary, I think, was named after a bishop of Poitiers who was called Hilary. So it was named after him, and it was originally applied to a session in the High Courts of Justice before it was then applied to a university term. I'm not quite sure why we revered a bishop of Poitiers from centuries ago, but that's where it comes from. So not as far as that, I mean, he may well have sort of have links in some way, his name going back to that Latin Hilaria, but that's not why it was called Hilary term, much as I love the idea of festivities.
The joy of this podcast is that it is listened to all over the world, and we may have somebody in Poitiers who has heard the programme and can get in touch with us. It's something else, no, it's purple at somethingelse.com. is the address. So let's now take questions from anywhere, including up in the expensive seats. Anybody has got a question that they would like to ask, just raise a hand.
There's one down here, Gyles.
Microphones will come towards you.
I'm very partial to gooseberry fool and rhubarb fool.
Good
and I'm
point.
just wondering if there's a connection between the two words.
Yes, I think it's the idea as of being full of froth. It's quite interesting because it's quite a sort of full of air, isn't it, a gooseberry fool or whatever, but the names for slightly unappetising, originally, concoctions that became puddings have also given us bywords for foolishness. So balderdash, for example, which means rubbish, doesn't it, these days, was a really horrible concoction of curdled milk and ale and sometimes a dead pigeon. I mean, really weird things. And that gave us balderdash. And flummery was another one. Flummery was similar to a gooseberry fool, I think. It was something sort of light and airy. So I think the idea is it was just full of hot air or cold air or whatever. Likewise, the follis, meaning the windbag. So.
And what about mousse, as in a chocolate mousse? I'm very partial.
Oh, yeah. I don't think that's got anything remotely negative about it. You'll be pleased to hear.
Where does that come?
That's French.
Mousse, as in mousse, something that's bubbly and...
Yeah, because mousse is an adjective that's applied to wine, isn't it? When you get sort of little bubbles on the surface. I think you're right.
So it's little bubbles.
I think it's little bubbles again. But that's exactly what you get in a chocolate mousse, isn't it? It's light and airy.
Any more questions? Yes, in the fourth row on this side here.
Hi, a very dear friend of mine passed away a little while ago, and he always used a term. He didn't swear ever, but what he would say was footle-bootle.
Ooh.
Is that actually a word, or has he made it up?
I think he might have made it up. But you never know. It might be one of the many, many euphemisms we have for swearing.
Oh, footle-bootle. Because it begins with the F, probably. Is that it?
Yeah, could be. Des O'Connor, when he was doing Countdown, used to say piddle-bum and stocking tops. That was his, whenever he had to retake something. OK, let's see what the dictionary comes up with. No. It might be in a slang dictionary, but I suspect it was... Who was it? Do you remember?
It was a friend of hers who's no longer
Yeah,
with
it was
us.
a lovely gentleman called Graham Gibbs, who was a historian.
Yeah.
And he just always used to use that word, but he reminds me so much of Gyles, so I just thought it's a great word to ask.
Poodle, poodle.
That's very sweet of you to say that. I note that he was of great age and is now no longer with us. But nonetheless, I take that as a compliment. Bless him.
Yeah, I suspect it's a homemade euphemism that doesn't make it any less legitimate, and it's quite sweet, isn't it, Foodle Boodle? I think it's time to get to our trio.
What? No time for more questions? A quickie. A
This
quickie.
is the
What?
gentleman who's
That's
been to
what
one of
Bill
ours
Finton
before.
thought. Asked for a quickie and they brought him a quiche. It was a misunderstanding.
Thank you very much. What's the difference in the word sue is in terms of sue for peace or suing a person in a legal sense?
I imagine it's to do with pursuit. You're suing. You're pursuing something.
Yes, exactly.
To
Yes,
sue for
suere.
peace, to sue in litigation.
Yes, suere, absolutely right. Latin for follow.
Suere,
Yes.
Latin for follow.
Yeah. So it is the idea of chasing someone, I suppose, in the sense of suing them.
I sometimes know the answers,
Really? You often do.
but I never do when we get to our trio. It's time for the trio.
Yes, so I have come up with a word for our audience without a definition, and I've asked you to submit your own definitions. And the first one, I think I was asking for it really, because it was clinch poop.
Who?
Clinch poop.
A clinch poop.
Noun, yeah.
C-L-I-N-C-H-P-O-O-P.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay, so from Beast of the Links in St Andrews, we have a wooden device used for pinching floor joists together on ship, particularly useful on the poop deck. That makes sense.
Very good.
Unfortunately, it now becomes really scatological, which I guess I was asking for. But Anne and Carol in London, I love this one. A clinch poop means attention to detail, as in anally retentive. That's very good.
Oh, that is genius.
That is very good.
That has to win the prize.
And then Vanessa in Devises, I'm afraid, says clenching during a poo to break up the size.
Oh, no, no.
I know. Sam, our lovely producer here, says 90% of the answers were variations on the poo theme.
Oh.
So, yeah, I think, well, Anne and Carol definitely, don't you
Read the
reckon?
definition again, it's so good.
Attention to detail, as in being anally retentive.
Whoa, a clinch poop.
Yeah, very good.
What is the true meaning?
A person lacking in gentlemanly breeding.
Oh, a clinch
Yes.
poop. A person lacking in gentlemanly breeding.
Yes. I think the anally retentive is far better. Okay, so the second one was thimble famble.
Thimble fan.
Thimble famble. So, John, go to bed. Have I pronounced that correctly? John,
Is there
go to
somebody
bed.
called John Go to Bed here? I mean, he's from a medieval
perfect.
mystery play. Oh,
Perfect.
John Go to Bed, meet Mrs. English. That's fantastic. Do you know, it's April Fool's. These people have been sending us up all afternoon. John Go to Bed,
In
come
Harlow. In Harlow, as in the T is silent.
on. Is it genuinely your name, sir?
Oh, he said that with such kind of yes. Okay, I'm so sorry. You've had this all your life. Anyway, fimble famble. Trying to find a sewing thumb guard in a hurry. A fimble famble. I like that. Okay, Toby Phillips in Worcestershire says, when one has imbibed, then tried walking in a forest. A fimble famble. And Sue in Staines says, aborted hanky-panky. Fimble famble.
The lives you people lead. My.
So actually, let me tell you what fimble famble means. It's a lame excuse.
A lame excuse.
Yes.
The thimble famble.
But I reckon, do you think aborted hanky-panky?
Yes.
Sue in Staines, thank you for that one. And I should just say, I think everyone wins
What's she called?
Sue in Staines.
Sue in Staines. I think there's linked somehow with the theme of the so far, isn't it? Okay.
So the third one was meldrop.
Meld.
A meldrop. This is from Kerry in Malvern. When you squat too low to rise back up. Meldrop.
How do you spell meldrop?
Meldrop.
When you spot.
When you squat too low to be able to get back up again.
Oh, that happens to me a lot. Meldrop.
Okay, then it's when a presenter is replaced on Bake Off. Very good.
Oh, these are clever.
That's from William Wallace in Gloucester. And Karen and Mark in Lincolnshire say a meldrop is the same as brewer's droop, but for girls. Okay, the real definition is not much nicer, actually. It's a drop of mucus hanging from the nose.
Oh, a
Yeah,
meldrop.
but there is a word for it. Isn't that amazing?
It's a we often want to know that little drip on the end of the nose.
Giles, we need to wrap up.
What? We need to wrap up? What are you going to wrap up in?
We need to wrap up. We are going to wrap up in one of our tea towels.
I usually end with a poem. It's a very short poem.
Yes.
And because it's April Fool's Day, I thought this is one I would do. It's easy enough to be pleasant when the world goes round and round, but the man worthwhile is the man who can smile with his trousers falling down.
You do the credits?
Something Rhymes with Purple is a Something Else production. It was produced by Lawrence Bassett and Harriet Wells, alongside Sam Hodges from Tilted Co. for the live shows. Additional production from Chris Skinner, Jen Mystery, Jay Beale and...
The clinch poop himself.
Golly!